In the next edition of It's About Money, we'll be talking with Cyndy Rochford, who's a mediator. We're going to be exploring how couples and other parties can disintegrate or divide up their affairs. So I'll be talking with Cyndy, and stay tuned for the next show. Hello and welcome to another edition of It's About Money. I'm Nannette Nocon, and thank you for joining us. I'm excited to have a good friend, Cyndy Rochford, who's a mediator, to be my guest today. I've been excited about her field of mediation and sharing that with our audience. Cyndy, thank you so much for being
Thank you for having me.
Great. So let's talk about mediation. We hear it so much, and it's about separating stuff, right? Help us define what mediation is.
Mediation has been around for a very long time, and it's basically the process of helping parties that are in an adversarial nature figure out a solution. And when you are talking about divorce mediation, it's couples that are separating and that intend to divorce, and it's working with them to develop a memorandum of understanding with the mediator and ultimately an agreement that will be filed with the courts for the divorce that will divide up their assets, outline support, and outline a parenting plan for the children.
I see. Well, that's pretty clear. I love the way you describe that. Does it follow the law? Does mediation follow the law?
Absolutely. And what we do as a mediator is make sure that our clients are informed. So as the mediator, you're a neutral party. You're there to facilitate the discussion between the two parties. But it's absolutely imperative that they have the information that they need, that they can make informed decisions. So not only do we follow the law, but we make sure that they understand what the law is.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. That's important, rather than going into a path that's clearly not acceptable.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So are there, for couples that are in conflict and proceeding in the path of divorce, what are the advantages for them to go through mediation first? Because not everybody goes through mediation.
Correct, correct. New York State is now a no-fault divorce state. So what that means is that there does not need to be proven any fault. It's just, if two parties decide, even if one party decides that they want a divorce, then that can occur, and you don't have to prove that there were issues, that there were problems, infidelity, abuse, anything along that nature. So what you do as a mediator is we sit down with the couples and we help them look at what all of their assets and liabilities and what they have to divide under New York, which is an equitable distribution, not equal distribution. You need to make sure that the division of assets and liabilities is equitable. So it doesn't have to be exactly 50-50, but you do need to make sure that both parties understand that there's got to be an equitable distribution, and it wouldn't be that somebody could walk away with most of the assets and somebody else who maybe just wants to get out of the marriage lets all of that go. That's what you need to be careful of, because sometimes there's anger, there's concern about leaving, there's guilt, and you might have parties where they're not entirely thinking about the future and what decisions they're making today are going to have long-term impacts. So one of the benefits, I think, of mediation is just the fact that you sit down with the couple together and help them understand this, as opposed to if they meet with their own attorney who might be saying, hey, you were wronged, or this isn't correct, or you earned this money, and you're looking at it more in an adversarial nature. We're looking at it like it's a marital pot, and we need to figure out an equitable way to distribute it. Mediation is also much faster than the typical litigation process. Most of the clients that I have, we meet in about 2-hour sessions, because I find that anything longer than that, it's just emotionally exhausting, and it's also often too much information to absorb. I would say generally about 3 to 4 of those 2-hour sessions allows us to complete all the work that we need to do. And then I write up a memorandum of understanding for the couples. So depending on the speed with which they're comfortable, you could be looking at maybe a couple of months. I mean, some couples it takes them longer because they need some time in between each session, or they need to gather information. Just scheduling, might not allow that. But generally, it's about 3 to 4 sessions. So also, not only is it quicker, it also allows, it's a much more financially advantageous process. A mediator charges by the hour, but what happens is that you have one mediator with both parties. So as opposed to an individual attorney representing one party and another attorney representing the other party, you have just one individual working with them. So not only do you have less time that it takes, but that also means that there's less time that they're being charged.
I see. And it's also efficient in a way.
Much more efficient, yes.
Two meetings, one meeting going each side. It's
correct.
One meeting that's combined. It's
right.
not he said, she said. It's like, let's talk about it together.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting. Do most attorneys welcome mediation?
That's a good question. There are a group of attorneys that are collaborative, and what that means is that they sit down at the table with their clients. So you have everybody sitting at the table. They believe that it's still important that that individual has their own representation. They're a little less negative towards mediation because in essence that's what they're doing. But again, it's not the couples that are working through this, it's really the attorneys. I'll go out on a limb and say that generally most matrimonial attorneys are not in favor of litigation. They seem to have this sense that one party is going to get taken advantage of, or the weaker party, as they might call it, or the less knowledgeable party financially is going to be adversarially served, in the process. That's not accurate, because as a mediator, my role is to make sure that they have the information that they need, that they can make informed decisions. I know what the law says, I know what the laws are, and it's important that I craft an agreement based on their decisions that is equitable. So it is not going to happen that one party walks away with a lesser unequitable amount than what they might have gotten in litigation.
I see. So really the operative word is equitable.
Correct.
And if possible, to preserve the resources for the couple as opposed to
giving them to the attorneys.
Yeah, right. I mean, we need those, but it's just that most couples don't really have a lot of resources to share, and and usually marriage kind of puts the assets together, and divorce.
It's very difficult in many cases to take one household and split it into two and have both of them have the same quality of living that you had at one. So it is important to, in my mind, to do it as fairly, but also as quickly and as efficiently as possible. I don't know that people always understand what and how long the process of litigation can take, and that can really eat up savings that the couple has managed to acquire.
Sure. So really going through the mediation process possibly removes litigation, but sometimes it doesn't.
Absolutely, right, absolutely, yes.
Great, well that's terrific too. And there's no time limit, so is there? Like if a couple decides they go through mediation and through 3 or 4 sessions, it's all taken care of, that they don't have, there's no waiting period, is there? Or is there one?
No, there is not a waiting period. That's gone now under the no-fault law.
I see.
So, yes, and it's interesting because some couples will come in and they might work with the mediator on what we call the parenting plan, on making custody decisions, on making weekly living arrangements, you know, who's going to have the children what days of the week, how are we going to set that up. Mediation is very flexible in that you don't, most couples that start in mediation end up doing the entire process through mediation, but it is possible that you might just craft part of what your entire divorce agreement is going to be with the mediator. And then if you really struggle to work out support or division of assets, that could end up in litigation. It doesn't happen very often, but it is possible. So it's important for couples to understand that they might want to try mediation first and see if together they're able to work out a solution. One of the things I find is that when couples are able to do that, they really feel a sense of empowerment, that they themselves were able to come up with the plan that works best for their family. Who knows their family better than they do?
Sure.
They also have a vested interest in following what it is that was established because they helped craft that solution. And I also think that it gives a lot of couples a way to communicate. We help facilitate the communication with them. We're not therapists, but we've had a lot of training in terms of how to work with people in conflict. So going through mediation can also be a very positive step, particularly if there are children where you are going to be connected to each other through those children for many years. And we work very hard to make sure that that couple has a process so that they can continue to discuss parenting decisions and parenting issues together in the future.
That's great. So it's really all-encompassing.
Yes.
And it's nice to know that most people go through mediation actually follow through.
They do follow through with it, yes.
Yeah, that's great. So talk to me about, you talked about the training as a mediator. What's involved in that? How does one become a mediator? No, you're an attorney by education.
Yes.
And had practiced law also.
Right.
So, so help me put that in perspective. Not all mediators are attorneys. But
No, not all mediators are attorneys. And it's interesting because I think you find two groups. Some mediators are attorneys, and myself, for example, I have just chosen that I like the process of helping people come together as opposed to the legal process where you're fighting each other. So to me, it just has been a very interesting process to take my legal skills and kind of hone them in a slightly different direction. But I also understand the law. I know how to research it. I know what to do if there are legal issues. The other group that often comes to mediation are people that might have been in more of a mental health background. So they are used to working with people that are dealing with issues, family issues or marital issues, and they have chosen to become a mediator. In one sense, they're sitting now with both parties as opposed to counseling just one. Regardless of your background, when you become a mediator, you need to go through a very extensive training, and it's approximately 40 hours all on mediation skills and what the basic law is for matrimonial and family law. We also have many opportunities throughout the year, and most of us definitely take advantage of this, of going to continuing education programs so that we keep up with not only the latest developments in the law, for example, the upper limit for income when you're determining child support changes on a yearly basis. So you need to make sure that you know what that is, because you can't be setting up support payments based on the law from a few years ago. But it also gives us training in new ways to facilitate this type of communication. We go through extensive training on abuse situations so that we are trained to recognize if there might be some domestic abuse or domestic violence in a situation, because there again, you need to make sure that both parties feel very comfortable with speaking in that environment. And if we sense that there is an issue there, then we have the training on how to deal with that. So that's what we have. Some attorneys and other, non-attorney mediators have chosen to like apprentice when they first start out, which is what I did. I had all the background as a lawyer, and I went through the mediation training, but I also wanted to watch a couple of more experienced mediators and just kind of understand how they go about different client situations. It's probably very similar to what anybody would do when they start out in a profession and you have a mentor.
Sure,
So,
sure.
yeah.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to take a quick break. My guest is Cyndy Rochford, who's a mediator. It's about money, and we'll be right back.
Despite difficult circumstances, all across the state, New Yorkers are saying no to foreclosure. The new Homeowner Protection Program offers free housing counseling and legal services to assist homeowners at risk of foreclosure. The New York Attorney General's office wants you to stay in your home. To connect with a professional who can help, contact our statewide hotline today. More New Yorkers are keeping their home. That's what I call a great sign.
And we're back. I'm Nannette Nocon. It's about money. My guest is Cyndy Rochford, and she's a mediator. Cyndy, thank you so much for sharing what a mediator goes through. It sounds like an extensive process and a lot of renewal to make sure that it's kept up, that one keeps up with the law and so on. So, and I love that you shared why you chose to do that, to help people to come together. I think it's beautiful. So, when a couple goes, the result of mediation is a matter of public record. Is that correct? Because it's used in the divorce process?
It's a little, yes. What ultimately happens is you sit down and should I walk you through my process?
Yeah, that would be great. Yes.
When a couple comes to me for mediation, I usually get an email or a phone call from one or the other parties, and I'll explain very, very briefly what it is that I do. And then I'll ask them to come in for an initial consultation, and there's no charge to that. But I want to explain to them what the process is and how it works. As a mediator, I do not take a retainer, so many attorneys, when they're going through a divorce with a person, they ask for money up front. As a mediator, and I believe most mediators practice this way, we do not take retainers. So what we do is just at the end of a session, we'll ask for our fee then. And that allows the couple also to proceed on their timetable with what they can afford, as opposed to having to come up with money all up front. So a couple would come in and I'll have a consultation. If they decide they want to proceed, I have a very detailed agreement which just sets forth what the process is, that I'm a neutral party, that everything is confidential, and goes through what information we will be covering. And then we will start. So the next session, I let the parties tell me if there's an area that they really want to start with. And it's interesting because basically there's three areas. One is the parenting plan. The second is equitable distribution of the assets and liabilities. And the third is support, child support and sometimes spousal support. Most couples choose to start with either the parenting portion or with the financial support. And a lot of that depends on where they're at. If they are still living together, they often want to start with the parenting part, figure out how that's going to look for the children. We might talk through how to tell the children if they haven't done that yet. I have a number of resources, and I actually, if there are couples that have young children, even up through middle school and high school, I have a wonderful book that was written by a doctor, a psychologist here in Rochester. Her name is Joanne Pedro Carroll, and she talks about all of the issues of children with divorce. So I will give the couples a copy, theirs to keep, and we'll start going through how that's going to look. For some couples, if they want to split right away or they are in separate households, we might start with the financial portion because they're trying to figure out, how do we do this? How do we separate our accounts? How do we make sure that somebody's not spending money that I don't know about? There can be sometimes some trust issues. So we figure out where we're going to start. Generally, it takes about 2 hours to go through each of those issues. I find occasionally that a couple will need additional support or help, and whether they need to talk to their accountant or need a referral to accountant. If there is a private business, if there's tax issues, I have a number of professionals that I can refer them to. At times, those professionals might come in and meet with all of us, but typically I let the couple go to, you know, either their choice or who I might have referred them to, and work outside of the mediation process, get the information that they need, and then come back and we pull it together. Just as a quick aside, if there's somebody that has a private business, you might have someone that owns a small store or a small company or a contracting business. We might need to get that valued. If there's a pension, we might need to get that valued. Mm-hmm. I can give them the basic outlines of the law, but depending on what the actual facts are of their case, we might need to get some outside information. Mm-hmm. So we'll do that. We go through the process, we handle all of the issues that need to be discussed, and then I write up a memo of understanding. Basically, that is a document that sets out everything that we've covered. And it is often pretty lengthy, 30 to 40 pages, depending on how much we need to cover, whether or not there are children involved. They take this document then, and there's two ways they can go. I encourage each party to have their own attorney to review it for them, looking at it from their point of view. Mm-hmm. Some couples don't want to do that. Mediation allows you to think outside the box. So some couples will say, well, you know, I know that my attorney isn't going to like that I gave up the house, but I was willing to give up the house because I wanted to keep all of my pension. Or, you know, we want to divide child raising this way, and we know that my attorney is not going to think that's a wise idea, but here's why it works for us. So all of those reasons for why they made their decisions are in my agreement. I do, as I said, encourage them to go to each to have it reviewed by their own attorney. If they choose not to do that, I have a number of attorneys that act as neutral attorneys, mm-hmm. and these two couples can go to that particular attorney, and they will put it in the form that's needed so that it can be filed with the court for a separation agreement that's legally binding, and then the divorce itself.
I see.
And some couples prefer to do that. Again, that's a little bit less costly mm-hmm. if you use one attorney. And, you know, they're comfortable with where they're at. They feel very good about it. I've also had parties where they each have their own attorney going through the process, just that they go back with and talk to. And then at the end, they have to choose one or the other to write the agreement, which it's fine. At that point, everything is all set out.
I see. So it provides a lot of flexibility, like you said, thinking outside the box.
Correct.
Making it work for the couple because no other parties know about the way their family works except
Absolutely.
the couple. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
It's really empowering, like you said, to make that happen. So, so from a financial perspective, it sounds like mediation is clearly the better way to start out with, and hopefully, you know, end up with in terms of a divorce process.
Yes, it definitely is much more cost effective. It's also important for people to know that mediation is voluntary. So if at any point and I have not had this yet, but at any point if a couple feels or one party feels I'm struggling with this, then they have the right to stop mediation and both seek counsel and go through the litigation process. So it is important for them to understand that they're there because this is how they want to tackle the end of their marriage.
I see. That's great. And how do people mostly find mediators? I mean, it's kind of like the old phone book, but, you know, not too many people have phone books anymore.
Right.
Just
some people go online. Uh-huh. A lot of it is word of mouth. Mm-hmm. We also find a number of counselors now. Mental health professionals are very, very positive about mediation because they know that it is less stressful, it's less antagonistic. It really helps the parties get through this process with communicating and hopefully coordinating and working together to divide and start their separate lives. So we're finding a lot of mental health professionals, if they have somebody who's come in and is either seeking a divorce or their spouse is seeking a divorce, they'll say, you know, you might want to think about mediation. I think that's I think that's going to be a more effective, efficient, and much healthier way for you to go.
Sure. So it sounds to me like removing the emotions of anger, if you will, because most divorces start out with a lot of anger, that if one can look at that in a logical way, I guess.
And I don't want to minimize that in mediation we do have sessions where there's anger and there's pain, and you know, we're trained to handle that, and that's expected. It's rare that you have a couple going through where there isn't some emotion that's played out from one party or the other. And often there's one party that's seeking the divorce and the other party, for whatever reason, has been blindsided. And you know, the party that's seeking it might have already come to terms with what's happening, and the other party needs to work through that process. And we're trained to understand that and help them still go through mediation, but not minimize what it is that they need to feel and how they're feeling and how to work through that.
I see. So there's still a lot of emotions, but it's a matter of just coming to agreement on how to deal with it. After all, people come together because of emotions, so exit because of emotions as well. So that's very interesting. So that's great. I really appreciate you going through the steps for me. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with regards to the process of mediation? That you might...
Well, the other area of practice that I am starting to focus on that I'm very excited about is called elder mediation. And I think it's a topic that is going to become more and more prevalent as we have the baby boomers moving through and as people age and they live longer. But what elder mediation does, what I do is I sit down at a table with a family, and there might be issues between siblings as to how they want to handle something with their parent. There might be disputes between the parent and the children. You know, the parent might want to stay in their home. The children want them to be placed someplace where they know that they're cared for and that they're safe. So elder mediation is a little different, obviously. We're not doing a document that's filed with the court, but we're basically sitting down with the family and working through a solution that all of them can feel comfortable with. It's a very rewarding area to me because these are family units, and generally most people have the loved one's interests at heart. They just might be coming at it from a different way. And what I sometimes find is that the elder is the person whose voice isn't really being heard. And we need to make sure that that's heard, and we need to make sure that they understand why their children or nieces or nephews or, you know, younger siblings might be coming at it from a different angle. It's also interesting because you will find a lot of family dynamics come up in mediation. I have a book that I really like that I recommend to people, and it's called Mom Always Liked You Best. And you know, you find that when you're sitting at the table and you have siblings that are in conflict and they're forgetting that the one they're working towards is the parent. They are too caught up in previous, you know, arguments and perceptions. And so that's a new area that I'm working in. I find that often 1 or 2 sessions with that, and they've all at least had their voices heard and can usually come up with a path to take that makes everybody relatively comfortable.
That's wonderful. I appreciate you sharing with that. And thank you for being a guest at my show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, our guests, for listening in. I'm Nannette Nocon, and it's about money. Until next time.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If you have any questions for It's About Money, please email Nannette at nnocon@aol.com. This program was produced through Penfield Community Television in Penfield, New York.